Hi everybody and welcome to Teen Book Tuesday. My name is Lorie and I am the teen librarian at Manlius Library, coming to you from my teen room. Last week I told you about a book that I have been waiting for all year, The Left-Handed Booksellers of London by Garth Nix. And it turns out it was well worth the wait. It's a fabulous book. This week I'm going to tell you about a book that I loved but had never heard of. It's called The Inheritance Games and it's by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. She's written some other YA books, but she'd never really been on my radar. Then this book started getting some good reviews, so I ordered it for the teen room. And then when it came in, I started to read it, and I instantly fell in love. It's about Avery. She has a plan for her future. Her mother is dead. Her father has disappeared. It's just she and Libby, her half-sister, who are trying to survive, living day to day. Sometimes she's living in her car. She just wants to get through high school, win a scholarship because her grades are good, and get out. But then her fortunes change like that. Let's find out how. By the time I returned to the great room, Jameson Hawthorne had miraculously managed to find a shirt and a suit jacket. He smiled in my direction and gave a little salute. Beside him, Grayson stiffened, his jaw muscles tensing. "Now that everyone is here," one of the lawyers said, "let's get started." The three lawyers stood in triangle formation. The one who'd spoken shared Alyssa's dark hair, brown skin, and self-assured expression. I assumed he was the Ortega in McNamara, Ortega, and Jones. The other two, presumably Jones and McNamara, stood to either side. Since when does it take 4 lawyers to read a will? I thought. "You are here," Mr. Ortega said, projecting his voice to the corners of the room, "to hear the last will and testament of Tobias Tattersall Hawthorne. Per Mr. Hawthorne's instructions, my colleagues will now distribute letters he has left for each of you." The other men began to make the rounds of the room, handing out envelopes one by one. "You may open these letters when the reading is concluded." I was handed an envelope. My full name was written in calligraphy on the front. Beside me, Libby looked up at the lawyer, but he passed over her and went on delivering envelopes to the other occupants of the room. "Mr. Hawthorne stipulated that all of the following individuals must be physically present for the reading of the will: Skye Hawthorne, Zara Hawthorne Caligaris, Nash Hawthorne, Grayson Hawthorne, Jameson Hawthorne, Alexander Hawthorne, and Ms. Avery Kylie Grams of Newcastle, Connecticut." I felt about as conspicuous as I would have if I'd looked down and discovered I wasn't wearing clothes. "Since you're all here," Mr. Ortega continued, "we may begin." Beside me, Libby slipped her hand into mine. "I, Tobias Tattersall Hawthorne," Mr. Ortega read, "being of sound body and mind, decree that my worldly possessions, including all monetary and physical assets, be disposed of as follows. To Andrew and Lottie Laughlin, for years of loyal service, I bequeath a sum of $100,000 apiece, with a lifelong rent-free tenancy granted at Wayback Cottage, located on the western border of my Texas estate." The older couple I'd seen earlier leaned into each other. All I could think was $100,000. The Laughlins' presence wasn't mandatory for the reading of the will, and they'd just been given $100,000 apiece. I tried very hard to remember how to breathe. "To John Oren, my head of my security detail, who has saved my life more times and in more ways than I can count, I leave the contents of my toolbox, held currently in the offices of McNamara, Ortega, and Jones, as well as a sum of $300,000. Tobias Hawthorne knew these people, I told myself, heart thumping. They worked for him. They mattered to him. I'm nothing. "To my mother-in-law, Pearl O'Day, I leave an annuity of $100,000 a year, plus a trust for medical expenses as set forth in the appendix. All jewelry belonging to my late wife, Alice O'Day Hawthorne, shall pass to her mother upon my death to be distributed as she sees fit upon hers." Nan harumphed. "Don't you go getting any ideas," she ordered the room at large. "I'm going to outlive you all." Mr. Ortega smiled, but then that smile faltered. He paused and then tried again. "To my daughters, Zara Hawthorne Caligaris and Skye Hawthorne, I leave the funds necessary to pay off all debts accrued as of the date and time of my death. Mr. Ortega paused again, his lips pushing themselves together. The other two lawyers stared straight ahead, avoiding looking at any member of the Hawthorne family directly. Additionally, I leave to Skye my compass. May she always know true north. And to Zara I leave my wedding ring. May she love as wholly and steadfastly as I loved her mother. Another pause, more painful than the last. Go on. That came from Zara's husband. To each of my daughters, beyond that already stated, I leave a one-time inheritance of $50,000. $50,000? I'd no sooner thought those words than Zara's husband echoed them out loud, irate. Tobias Hawthorne left his daughters less than he left his security detail. Suddenly, Skye's reference to Grayson as their heir apparent took on a whole new meaning. You did this! Zara turned to Skye. She didn't raise her voice, but it was deadly all the same. Me? Skye said, indignant. Daddy was never the same after Toby died, Zara continued. Disappeared, Skye corrected. God, listen to you! Zara lost hold on her tone. You got it in his head, didn't you, Skye? Batted your eyelashes and convinced him to bypass us and leave everything to your sons, Skye said. The word you're looking for is sons. The word she's looking for is bastards. Nash Hawthorne had the thickest Texas accent of anyone in the room. Not like we hadn't heard it before. If I'd had a son, Zara's voice caught. But you didn't. Skye let that sink in. Did you, Zara? Enough. Zara's husband stepped in. We will sort this out. I'm afraid there's nothing to be sorted. Mr. Ortega re-entered the fray. You will find the will is ironclad, with significant disincentives to any who might be tempted to challenge it. I translated that to mean, roughly, shut up and sit down. Now, if I may continue. Mr. Ortega looked back at the will in his hands. To my grandsons, Nash Westbrook Hawthorne, Grayson Davenport Hawthorne, James Winchester Hawthorne, and Alexander Blackwood Hawthorne, I leave everything, Zara muttered briefly. Mr. Ortega spoke over her. $250,000 apiece, payable on their 25th birthdays, until such time to be managed by Alyssa Ortega, trustee. What? Alyssa sounded shocked. I mean, what? The hell? Nash told her pleasantly. The phrase you're looking for, darling, is, what the hell? Tobias Hawthorne hadn't left everything to his grandsons. Given the scope of his fortune, he'd left them a pittance. What is going on here? Grayson asked, each word deadly and precise. Tobias Hawthorne didn't leave everything to his grandsons. He didn't leave everything to his daughters. My brain ground to a halt right there. My ears rang. Please, everyone, Mr. Ortega held up a hand. Allow me to finish. $46.2 billion, I thought, my heart attacking my ribcage and my mouth, sandpaper dry. Tobias Hawthorne was worth $46.2 billion, and he left his grandsons $1 million combined. $100,000 total to his daughters, another $500,000 to his servants, an annuity for Nan. The math in this equation did not add up. It couldn't add up. One by one, the other occupants of the room turned to stare at me. The remainder of my estate, Mr. Ortega read, including all properties, money assets, and worldly possessions not otherwise specified, I leave to Avery Kiley Grahams. And that is the start of the inheritance games. He left her his whole fortune. But there is a catch. Avery doesn't know him. She has no idea who he is, why ever he would leave the fortune to her. Her letter, when she opens it, simply says, I'm sorry. And it's from Tobias. So, the catch really is, to receive her inheritance, she has to move into this sprawling, secret passage-filled Hawthorne house, where every room bears the old man's touch and his love of puzzles and riddles and codes. She gets caught up in this world of wealth and privilege with danger around every turn. Of course, Tobias's actual relatives hate the fact and don't know why Avery has been left all of this entire fortune and estate, but there's a part of the will that says if they try to contest it, they get nothing, and they're removed from the estate. So they have to at least pretend to go along with it. She gets caught up in this world where she has to play this game just to survive, much less to get the inheritance. And of course, not everybody is going to be on her side, but also not everybody is against her. The problem is she needs to figure out who is who and who is actually on her side. It's fast-paced, suspenseful, and tons of fun. It's the start of a new series. It's filled with riddles and clues and secrets and puzzles and lots of twists and turns. This is great for teens who grew up loving the twisty puzzle books like The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Baisley Frankenweiler and The Westing Game, and even things like Encyclopedia Brown, where the clues are there and you just have to try to figure it out. And teens who are now fans of the Truly Devious series, One of Us is Lying, and series like that. Even the movie Knives Out or The Game Among Us. This is a great one. I highly recommend it. It's called The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Oh, and it's got a beautiful cover, which, as you know, is always a plus for me. So there you go. Thanks for joining me. Again, my name is Lorie. I am the teen librarian at Manlius Library in Central New York. You can find me here on our YouTube channel every single Tuesday at 4 p.m. Thanks again. See you next week. Happy reading.